I'd always been curious about the so-called dark web. I'd heard a bunch of stories about its deeper, darker corners, places no one should go, filled with things that no one should see. Now, it might sound creepy, but it got me pretty curious. But I could never be prepared for what I found when I stumbled across the Cannibal Cafe. It started innocently enough. Late-night boredom, a rabbit hole of clicks, and then suddenly I was there. The site was crude. Its design basic and outdated, but its purpose was clear. It was a gathering place for people with tastes that went beyond acceptable norms. It claimed to be fictional, but the posts felt too real, too detailed. I thought it was just another forum for sick fantasies. And then I saw the classifieds. People weren't just talking about cannibalism. They were either offering themselves up or asking for someone else to become meat. The language was careful, vague enough to avoid outright confession, but the user's intentions were unmistakable. It wasn't just some dumb site for sick role players. It was real. I should have clicked away, closed my laptop, and just gone to bed. But instead, I stayed. Part of me thought it was all some elaborate joke, some twisted forum for entertainment, and I told myself that I was just observing and that I wasn't a part of it, just a tourist passing through. And then I found it. It was a journal entry written by someone who claimed to have actually cannibalized another person. He didn't use his real name, none of them did, but the way he described everything, the way he wrote, it made it sound like the God's honest truth. He talked about meeting a man online, someone who was tired of living, and then they agreed to meet. He would end him, butcher him, and eat him, and the man actually wanted it. And I felt sick reading it, but I couldn't stop. He described the meeting in a way that made it sound almost normal, like two friends getting together. They had dinner first, an actual meal, as if to ease into what was coming, and then the man who wrote the journal led the other man to a room he had prepared for the occasion. He claimed to have covered everything in plastic, set up tools, knives, and hooks. It sounded clean, clinical even, and it absolutely horrified me. The man who was tired of living, who was called the volunteer, was told to strip down and lay on the table. He was calm. He brought a letter, a sort of contract explaining his consent, and the writer said that he asked one last time if he was sure, and he claimed the volunteer smiled and nodded. And then it began. The description of what followed made my stomach churn. He wrote about the knife, the blood, the way the man's body reacted. He wrote about the sounds, the smell, and he was careful and precise. He didn't rush. He said it was important to honor the volunteer's wishes, to make it meaningful. There was no anger, no rage, just a kind of reverence. He described the meat, the way it looked, the texture. He wrote about cooking it, seasoning it, and then finally, eating it. I should have stopped reading, but I couldn't. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash or something. Horrifying, but impossible not to watch. The way he wrote made it feel real, more real than anything I'd ever read before, but it wasn't just the details. It was the emotion the guy put into his writing that really sent chills through me. He wasn't writing to brag or shock anyone. He was confessing, unburdening himself almost. There was a sadness in his words too, a weight to them, as if what he'd done had changed him in ways he didn't fully understand yet. When I finally closed my laptop, it was early morning and the sun was creeping through the blinds. I felt nauseous and hollow, like something had been done that couldn't be undone. And I tried telling myself it wasn't real, that it was just some story, but I couldn't forget the way it was written. The details, the emotion. It stayed with me, gnawing at my thoughts as I showered, toweling off, and then drifted off to sleep after climbing into bed. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to distract myself, but nothing worked. The story kept replaying in my head over and over again, and I started dreaming about it, Nightmares where I was the volunteer lying on the table, waiting for the knife, and I'd wake up sweating with my heart racing and my mouth parched and dry. I told myself I wouldn't go back to that site, but the pull was too strong. I needed to know more. I needed to understand, and so I did return. The journal entry was still there along with the others. More stories, more confessions. Some were less detailed and others more so. Some sounded fake, exaggerated, but others had that chilling ring of truth to them, just like the first one I'd read. I started reading them all, one by one, each more horrifying than the last, and I didn't eat meat for almost 2 weeks around that time. I couldn't look at it without imagining the descriptions from the stories, but at the same time I couldn't keep away. I became obsessed, spending hours on the site, diving deeper into its archives, noticing patterns and connections between different posts. Some of the users seemed to know each other, referencing past events or sharing tips. It was a full-on cannibalistic community hidden just below the surface of the regular internet. One night, I found a new post. It was from the same user who had written the journal entry that started it all. He was back, sharing another story, only this time, it was different. He wrote about the aftermath, about how he couldn't stop thinking about it. He said he craved that feeling of godlike power again. He tried to live a normal life, but it was impossible. The taste of the meat, the act itself, he felt like they'd changed him. He wrote about finding another volunteer, someone else who was tired of living. He described the process again, but this time it felt darker, more desperate. He wasn't honoring anyone's wishes anymore. He was feeding his addiction. The reverence was gone, replaced by depravity, and he wrote about the guilt, the shame, but also the satisfaction, the way it filled the void inside him and the peace that brought him, if only for a moment. During those 2 or 3 days where I was glued to Cannibal Cafe, I stopped leaving my apartment. I avoided friends, family, and anyone who might notice the change in me, and my world shrank to the glow of my laptop screen and the endless stream of stories and posts. The dreams got worse. They weren't nightmares anymore, they were vivid, detailed, and I wasn't the volunteer anymore. I was the one holding the knife. It took a long talk with a close friend to realize that my obsession with Cannibal Cafe was the symptom of some lingering depression I'd been wrestling with following the death of my father. Now that might sound very random to some people, but I guess I wasn't fully in touch with my own emotions regarding his passing. Reading about that clinical process of death and dismemberment forced me to confront them in ways I wasn't entirely aware of at the time. And then after talking to my friend about it, it's like it unlocked this new perspective. I stopped visiting the Cannibal Cafe, and for a long time it was out of my mind, until I heard about the owner getting arrested in Germany for actually killing and eating somebody, just like the person had described in the post. I managed to half convince myself that, in reality, the site was nothing but an elaborate fantasy run by some very disturbed individuals. But hearing about that guy, Armin Maivis, arrested, shattered that delusion, and had made me realize that the world really is much darker than it was darker.
In the world where internet is the source of everything in daily life, there are parts of internet you will wish you never came to know. I got to know about this part of the internet when I was working on my assignment project, and I needed a route that isn't easily available in my place, and I was trying to do the nursery and find the route, but no mystery said that they had that. I was asking favors from the guys from the diner that we worked in, and then one of the guys told me that there was a place where I can find them all, but there's a place that I can get whatever I want, and however rare it might be, I could find it there. And then he told me that in order to get that, I could be using a Tor browser. I had no idea what it was. It was the first time. I was not sure that it would be safe, so I told one of the technical friends to help me out with it, and he told me to get another laptop if I don't want my information to a suspicious stranger. And then I found it. I used one of the laptops that I found on Craigslist for $60, and then I started trying to find it, and my friend logged it in carefully, and we started surfing through the dark web, and we reached a place where I could find the route. It was some dealer from Cambodia who was ready to sell us the route, and I was relieved. It meant too much, and then he demanded $1,000 for it. There was no way I was going to pay $1,000 for it. And then my friend, he told me that it's better that we don't surf on here much, and he told me to take the call information and make rest of the deal through the phone, and we did. I was about to call him when my friend stopped and said, "Why do you want to hand out your contact information to a sketchy guy? They'll figure out everything from that. Just call from a payphone." And then we headed out to the payphone and started the conversation about the price negotiation. He was trying to act like he was tough to shake. I told him that $50 is the highest that I will go for it, and then after minutes of negotiation, we agreed on $60. I let him have the last call. I was willing to give him the $100, so I won anyways. It was the route very specific to Cambodia, and I was meant to get the route in 4 days because it was being shipped. And then he later gave me some information about the dropout and where I can pick it up. I had to take it from his cousin Tran in the States. I realized which Tran he was talking about. He lived in our town. When he gave me the address, I was surprised to see that. Tran was in the same class as me. 4 days later, I saw Tran was standing away from his home and onto Miss Park's driveway. He looked suspicious. I knew he was waiting for me, but he did not know what. When I approached Tran, he said, "What are you doing here?" We shook hands and then I said, "I'm waiting for someone. You better leave, could be dangerous." And I told him, "No, it's not. I'm the guy you're waiting for. You got the package." And he looked at me and said, "Damn, man, I did not know you played like that. What's in the box?" And I told him that it was the route for a class project, and then he said, "Oh, shit, I totally forgot about that." And then I went on and put $60 out for him to take. And he looked at me and said, "It's 100, big man." And I told him that I had a deal with his cousin and $60. And then Tran said, "US rules here, baby, not Cambodia. You have to give the cut." And I refused, and then he said, "All right, cool with me. I'll keep it and get the grade up on the assignment. So cool, you can go." And that is when I reeled in and said, "Fine, take $100, just give me the route." I wasn't going to go through all that and not get my grades better. He took the $100 and went back to his house. Next day, we met again in the school. It was time to submit our reports, and everybody was coming forward, and then Tran and me submitted together. I saw him submitting just the picture of the route with a write-up, and then I did. It was a step up in the game, as I was going back thinking of myself as some kind of winner. The teacher called me out and said, "Why? Where did you get this route from? You were supposed to paste a picture of it, not the real route. Do you know how far away it is from its ecosystem?" The teacher went on to lecture me for a whole hour, and the whole snickering away over my try-hard attitude, and especially Tran, who got to make $100 out of this.
Despite the typical stereotype of parents pressuring their children to follow a particular path, my father never imposed his desires onto me. He never insisted that I strive for the highest grades or give up my interests for his sake. His parenting style often left me wondering if we were indeed related. However, his generosity in allowing me to spend money as I pleased reminded me of our shared connection. With his indifferent attitude to my life, I decided to pursue my dreams of becoming a painter. I took the bold step of enrolling in one of Chicago's most prestigious art schools, determined to hone my skills and make a name for myself in the art world. To ensure that I had ample time to practice my craft, I chose to live off campus and secured an apartment near my college. My father didn't say a word, even at that. As I began my semester, I found myself quickly making new friends. However, one particular guy, Paris, seemed to rub me the wrong way. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was that bothered me about him, but there was something about him that triggered me. Perhaps the way people kept comparing us, or the similarities in our voices made me feel uneasy. It could have even been that he had such a close relationship with his father, something I had always longed for but never had. I knew that my feelings of jealousy were petty and irrational, especially since he had done nothing but treat me with kindness. Yet I couldn't help but envy his similarities, even though I was wealthier than him. Despite my shortcomings, he seemed to have everything that I lacked. A festival was coming up soon, and the atmosphere was exciting. It was the first festival of the year, and as per tradition, all first-year students were expected to participate in various activities. Being a confident swimmer, I decided to showcase my skills in the swimming competition. However, on the day of the festival, as I walked towards the competition arena, my heart dropped when I overheard a group of students gossiping about Paris, my biggest rival, and his impressive swimming skills. The thought of competing against him made me feel uneasy, and I could feel a sense of resentment building up inside me. I knew this would be a challenging and intense competition, and if he won, I would have another reason to hate him. The competition began, and to my dismay, I was up against none other than Paris. I had always been afraid of facing someone better than me, and this was no exception. It was hard to admit, but Paris was a worthy challenger, and I couldn't help but acknowledge his skills, even though I hated that I had to face him. My heart sank as I watched Paris touch the finish line 2 seconds before me. I felt a rush of anger and frustration unlike anything I had ever experienced. Paris's constant presence and success had become a thorn in my side, and I was determined to end it. With a steely resolve, I began to hatch a plan to ensure I would never feel inferior to him again. Since I was never interested in father's business, I didn't know much about it, but I knew how to hire someone through the dark web. So, I hired a hitman anonymously to kill him. The evil part of my psyche that had seized control of my faculties was dominating my ability to make rational decisions. I told him I needed the task to be done within a week. As I entered the college gate, my gaze inadvertently fell upon Paris, striding ahead with his usual swagger. Seeing him triggered a rush of emotions within me, an inexplicable mixture of frustration, disappointment, and anger. I could feel my fingers involuntarily curling into a tight fist, a physical manifestation of my boiling rage. In the distance, I could see his father's car disappearing around a corner, and the realization that Paris was being handed everything on a silver platter only fueled my resentment further. Something clicked in me, and I decided I needed a change of plan. So I contacted Hilton and made a few changes. That following evening, I got a call from my dad, and the question he asked me was so weird that I had to see his name on the call phone screen again to make sure it was him. "How did you know?" he asked. What had gotten into him all of a sudden? "What are you talking about?" I asked in confusion. "About your father." I stared at the phone screen, thinking he had gone senile. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dad," I said, putting pressure on the word Dad to remind him that he was my father, in case he had forgotten about it. "You had him killed, didn't you?" As he uttered those words, there was an utter silence that followed. I couldn't speak a word, and neither did he. But then he said, "How much do you know?" he asked. After a brief pause, I replied, "Everything." I had no idea what he was talking about, but I felt I needed to act. I knew if I wanted to find out what nonsense he was uttering. "Listen, Luke, I don't know how you found out and how much you know, but you must know. Our child died right after his birth, and your mother was losing her mind. I didn't want to lose her. And when I saw you twins, I had to snatch you. But trust me, we love you just like we would have loved our son." As I heard this, my mind went blank, and I immediately disconnected the call. I couldn't process what I found out, and if Dad knew he was dead, that meant he was dead. My mind started replaying all the similarities I had with Paris, and the fact that I had my biological father killed just to make my own brother's life miserable. I wanted to turn back what I had done so badly that I ended up calling that hitman. But when he confirmed that he had done his job, I felt as if my soul had left my body. I had to receive my punishment. So I got up that instant and went to the nearest police station. My confession was ready, and whatever the punishment I deserved, I had convinced myself to receive it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
In the weeks after the death of my brother, I found myself looking for comfort on the internet. Around 4 months had passed and I discovered a forum created for twins dealing with the grief of losing their other twin. Whether from ending their own life or illness, thousands across the world were brought together for this one singular purpose. I admit I was somewhat shy about posting and remained a bit of a lurker. However, as I became more comfortable with the community, I grew into a daily poster and was able to befriend many on the forum. A select few of these people and I became very close and did much to help one another to work through our grief. One member, a girl who said she was from Montana, probably did the most of all to help me move forward. She had lost her twin sister in a similar circumstance, just as I had my brother, and had a specific insight many others in the forum did not. It was not long until her and I were confessing our deepest secrets to each other, and it was very nearly as if I hadn't lost my twin at all. You may ask why I would tell a complete stranger all my deepest and darkest secrets. I suppose the anonymity was the reason. Even if the person knows or thinks they know all about you, they still don't know your true identity and location. That aspect of the internet gives you carte blanche to bare your soul to a person you're confident doesn't know the true you. The connection we formed over my time on the forum was the best thing that could have happened to me at the time. However, my confidence in my anonymity and comfort with this person would ultimately come back to bite me and make my life on the internet and outside of it complete torture. It was an average ordinary morning when I discovered my friend's true face. I fired up my computer and opened my mail only to be overwhelmed by a barrage of angry and vicious messages. As I scrolled through each one, it soon became clear what was happening. Someone very close to me had dumped all my terrible secrets onto the forum and wider internet. I tried to deny it to myself for a long time who the identity of the person was, but I was eventually forced to face the facts. Apparently, my supposed friend on the forum had told everyone there some of my private feelings towards my dead brother and the way in which he chose to end his life. We all have those opinions or feelings we keep to ourselves because we know they wouldn't be popular with those around us. I never said anything terrible or anything like that, but most of my words surrounded my anger toward my twin. I probably could have phrased some of them better, but that's the fatal flaw of the internet. Without context or hearing the person's tone of voice, things can get lost or misconstrued. Over a short time, the situation would become far worse. The threatening messages started. People I had once called friends were now threatening my life. It wasn't just online either. The messages were soon coming to my phone. This fact only proved to cement her guilt since she was one of the very few who had my number. The most terrifying aspect of the phone messages was that many knew my real name and address. This was when I truly came to fear for my life. I'd become a bawling and panicking mess. When I would finally sum up the courage to confront her about this, the pieces would all begin to fall into place. Her written reply laid it all out clearly. I had foolishly walked right into the clutches of a person who hated me and my family. My friend, all these months, turned out to be the drug-addicted ex-girlfriend of my brother. In my opinion, she was one of the major reasons he took his life, and my family agreed, which is why we had barred her from the funeral and anything taking place that day. She swore she'd get back at us, and boy, she did. Apparently, she had been on the forum one day and guessed who I was. Just to be sure, she pretended to be a bereaved twin and started to suck up to me. Once it became obvious that I was who she thought I was, She saw it as an opportunity to get her revenge. In hindsight, things were starting to make more sense. She'd always been a bit pushy when trying to get me to tell her a secret. To make me more comfortable, she'd tell me something, which we all know now was a load of BS, and I would always fall for it. All through her message, it was clear she had no remorse for what she had done. In fact, upon hearing of the many threats in my life, she decided to push things along by doxing me. What she hoped to happen had, and she was very pleased by the result. This final message was the last time I'd heard from her. No replies would come to my following emails, and soon after, I'd be forced to get a new address. After I spoke with my family and our lawyer, I took their advice and got rid of all my prior connections. This included having to move to a new place. I was, and still am, concerned about the remainder of my family. Although my brother's ex was able to get her revenge on me, the rest of them were assumed to still be in danger. My father assured me that they would be fine, and from all appearances, he may be correct, at least for now. I had stepped away from the internet for almost 9 months and am just now beginning to dip my foot back into the pool. Naturally, I will never return to the forum in which all these problems spawned. Even though I've not yet had any run-ins with anyone from there, I will never again expose myself to the level of being identified. Even the account from which this story has been sent is a one-time use throwaway. So if any of those coming across this story may have any questions, I'm sorry. None will be forthcoming anytime soon, and certainly not from this account. If there's anything you can take away from this mishap, perhaps it is a lesson of caution. I and many others have discovered to our detriment how big of a sewer the internet can be. Like the sewer, there lurk many rats. On the internet, the rats are waiting and hiding to destroy others. Many have no reasons. They're just evil. I suppose I'm trying to advise you all to be careful and remember that no one on the internet is really your friend unless you know them in real life. And although many perils linger there, the internet is not real life.
Experiencing a break-in is a uniquely disturbing experience, especially if you're in the house. Not only does it rob you of your valuables, but also of your sense of safety at home. Maybe you'll never feel safe again. You're about to experience these horrors now, so get comfortable, subscribe, and let the darkness take control. This happened in the year of 1989, when I was 9 years old. I lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Forest, Virginia. It was like a Mayberry-like neighborhood. Most everyone knew each other. No crime, lots of families. Not everyone locked their doors at night. There were lots of kids my age in the neighborhood that the two on my street were my closest friend, Mitchell and Chase. The three of us were sort of a clique. Whenever a new kid moved into the neighborhood, we liked to go see him together and see what he was like and decide if he was cool or not. That year, their new family moved into a house near the end of the street. They had just one child, a boy named Parker. We invited him out a few times to play, and he seemed cool. So before long, he was almost one of the gang. Parker's mom was attractive, blonde, slim, always smiling. However, his dad was not a friendly man. He seemed annoyed by us kids, rarely spoke to us, and mostly just acknowledged us with iros and grunts. He also didn't come outside much. He worked nights, so we didn't see him often during the week, and on weekends, he was mostly banging around in his garage. One Saturday afternoon in the fall, Mitch and Chase were both away for some reason, so I went over to Parker's house alone to see if he wanted to play. He said his parents weren't home and invited me inside. That was a really strange experience for me. At 9, my parents never left me alone. They would call a babysitter over if they were going to be gone for even an hour. I asked Parker why he was home alone and made no secret that I was weirded out about it. But he seemed totally fine with it, like it happened all the time. So that put me at ease. We watched TV for a little bit. Then abruptly, Parker got off the couch and said, "Hey, you want to see something cool?" "Sure," I said. He led me down to the basement and pointed to a tool chest against the wall. "They're in there." Parker opened the bottom cupboard door of the tool chest, revealing a huge stack of Playboys. There had to have been at least 50 to 60 issues in there. I had no idea what I was looking at. I had never seen a naked woman before. The closest I'd come was seeing the scantily clad Tanya Roberts in the movie The Beatmasters. I remember watching that movie and being vaguely intrigued by the female form of what I saw in the Playboys was sort of repulsive. I wasn't necessarily the images of the naked women that churned my stomach, but the dank and musty smell of the basement, the dim lights, the crinkled, stiff, flaky feel of the magazine pages, as if the moisture of the basement was slowly turning them to pulp. It just felt wrong and gross, and I wanted to leave. Still, I just couldn't stop looking. I'd flip through one magazine, toss it back, then flip through another one. Somehow, I had this strange notion that I was finally getting something valuable for free, so I needed to cram as much of it into my brain as I could. Finally, Parker said, "We better get out of here. My mom will be home soon. You can tear some pictures out and take them home if you want." I ripped out one of the centerfolds and stuffed it into my pocket. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't want it for any self-gratification purpose. I just had an idea that I could use it to impress Michael and Chase later. When I got home, I stuffed the balled-up centerfold in the back corner of my closet under some toys. Despite not having a big understanding of what it was pornography, I was certain that if my mom found it, I'd be in big trouble. I went to sleep like normal that evening, but I woke abruptly in the middle of the night to a rough hand shaking my shoulder. I immediately knew something was wrong, because neither of my parents would have woken me up so firmly. Plus, there was a terrible smell, a rank combination of alcohol and motor oil. I opened my eyes, and with the aid of my bedside light, recognized Parker's dad standing over me, in my house, in my room. I wanted to cry, to scream for my dad, but the mag led down at me with so much hatred, so much fury. I was paralyzed. I was certain that if I did cry out, he would twist the head clean off my neck. "You stole from me." He said this in a low voice, low enough to not wake my parents in the other room. But in the quiet of my room, the words rang clear as a bell. He called me the F word. That's what really struck me. No adult had ever used the F word on me. Combined with his tone, expression, and body language, that word just cut me to the bone. "I want it back," he said. Normally, my heart hammering, I quietly and obediently went to my closet and dug out the balled-up centerfold from beneath the pile of Ninja Turtles. I held that out to him, and he snatched it. At this point, he went on a low, whispery rant at me, including a lecture about thievery and personal property. I don't remember all of it, but it went along the lines of, "I'll tell your parents, I'll call the cops, you'll go to juvie." But he said two phrases I distinctly remember. One was, "Don't come in my house again. Don't ever step foot in my yard." And the other was something that was so strange, said with so much certainty, that it burned with my memory and still haunts me to this day. "Don't ever look at this crap again." He clenched his fist around the bald DAP centerfold. It would turn you into something you don't want to be. Then he turned and walked silently out of the room. I was so creeped out about how silent he slipped away. Our floors were carpeted, that he literally made no sound as he disappeared down the hall into the darkness. It's like some malicious Santa Claus. It was like he had lots of previous practice sneaking around, which I found even more disturbing. When I thought back on the incident during the following years, it was that sneaking which haunted me most of all. Even more than the lecture and the threats, how quietly and stealthily he moved, like the Grinch in the cartoon, but not with the big cartoony stride. Like I would never be saved from him, no matter where I went in life. Like any time I went to sleep, he could just appear there without a sound, and I'd never hear him coming. The aftermath of this story is a whole story in itself. I won't get into all the details, but just summarize it. No sign of forced entry or evidence of him being there was ever found by me or anyone else. I never told anyone until I got really close to a few good friends my freshman year of high school. My parents never found out about the incident. I was convinced that I would be in so much trouble if they ever found out that I just figured it was better to live in fear than face the consequences. Obviously, Parker's dad never mentioned it to either of them, but of course, he wouldn't, that trespassing creep. I'm 35 years old now and have a good relationship with them, but I still can't bring myself to tell them what happened that night. I was emotionally damaged for a while. I had fear and anxiety and shyness issues. My grades slipped badly that year. I had a hard time sleeping at night after that and was tired all the time. Because I had chronic nightmares, my parents got me some prescription sleeping aids, and I couldn't sleep in the dark again until I was at least 15 or 16. I always had to have a lamp on my bedside. I couldn't go near Parker's end of the street from then on, much less than his yard or house. If my parents drove me by the house, I would simply point my head towards the opposite direction of the street and pretend to be looking out the window. My family moved 2 years later in 1991, and I never saw Parker again after that. I asked my dad sometime later if he always locked the doors at night. Right. He says yes, most of the time, but sometimes I forget. I asked him if he made sure all the windows were locked at night, and then he said that no, sometimes our mom opened them, and he forgot to lock them back when she closed them. So that answers the question as to how he got in the house. I still get queasy when I see porn. On one hand, like any red-blooded male, images of the internet of attracted women wearing no clothes catch my eye. But when I start to stare and get in the moment, the fear of that night starts creeping back in the unanswered questions. How did he even find out I had the page? Had he gotten home, seen his magazines weren't in proper order, and grilled Parker about it? Why the hell would this guy make such a fuss and go to some extreme measures just to retrieve one turn of page of an old Playboy? Makes no sense. What did he mean by it will turn you into something you don't want to be? A trespasser? An asshole who terrorized his kids? A porn addict? Was what he did to me that night. In some weird-ass way, his twisted attempt to try to do something altruistic to me, to warn me off from becoming like him. How does a guy have so much balls? Seriously, my parents were asleep one room away. My dad was a big dude, bigger than him. And my dad would have thrown that man right through a wall if you'd caught him in my room in the middle of the night. Regardless, malicious Santa Claus over a protective porn collector, terrorizer of children, and source of my nightmare and scar on my childhood. Let's not meet again.